Tucker Carlson went and interviewed the horror, which is Vladimir Putin, and the mainstream media is trying to gaslight the population as if he did something incredibly evil, akin to treason, something that no other journalist has dared to do in the past. Even though journalists from the mainstream media have in the past interviewed bin Laden and people from Hamas, and even Putin himself. Now, you can say that, well, in the past they didn't know how evil he was. Like, the evil just bubbled up to the surface now, and it's in such a measure that no person should ever be allowed to interview him. Take into account that during the Cold War, an American journalist also interviewed the president of Russia. It's not, again, the message is that this is unfathomable. Like, how dare he? And you had from the European Union Guy Verhofstadt suggesting that Tucker Carlson, for his shameful acts of journalism, should be banned from flight. Again, the fact that this person, Guy Verhofstadt, is one of my representatives in the European Union frightens me greatly. But anyway, right, so one of the things that Tucker did after interviewing Putin was to travel through Moscow. I mean, that kind of makes sense. I would probably do the same. Like, if I travel to another country, might as well get some footage from there. And one of the videos was actually pretty good. The other one was shit. The one that was shit was him going into the supermarket and talking about the prices there and saying that, wow, Russia is really amazing. And my question is, like, well, if it's so good, why aren't Americans going there to live, right? Like, why isn't there an influx of American refugees traveling to Russia? And the reason is that while the prices are low, so are the wages. Like, most people from Russia, from the middle class, according to Eurostat, they're spending around 30% of their income on groceries, compared to the Americans, which are only spending 10%. So, it's kind of like that. Like, he omitted to talk about that, which is why I think, like, if you were to attack Tucker Carlson, it would be that video. But he also made another video, which he talks about the Russian metro. And the Russian metro is actually one of the most beautiful metros in the world. Credit is what credit is due. Like, I understand that the liberal mentality from America is that, no, if we decide something is evil, everything connected to that is evil. Right? So, like, if you have a doctor which can cure cancer, but he said racismus on Twitter, then the doctor is evil and his cure for cancer must be evil as well. You think I'm joking, but remember when Donald Trump used Operation Warp Speed in order to make the vaccine legal? There were Democrats that were saying, like, oh, I would never, it's Donald Trump's vaccine, never. And when Joe Biden is in charge, oh, of course, if you don't take it, then you're anti-science. Like, you can notice how they are thinking, and it's like literally using populism as their moral compass, and everything that populism say, they go the other way around. Regardless if it makes sense or not. I mean, again, like, saying that the Russian metro is beautiful doesn't say anything about the Russian government. I mean, the Russian government can be evil, but the metro can still be beautiful, right? It's like saying the Nazis did the Autobahn. Like, say one nice thing about the Nazis. This is, like, one of those questions, and it's like, well, the Autobahn, like, they made that, and it's like, it's functional. Like, what do you want to do? Tear it down? Destroy it now just because it was made by bad people? No, like, it's there, it's functional, leave it alone. This is not the Democrat mentality. So anyway, they decide to attack Tucker Carlson over the metro. Let's see what arguments Jon Stewart has to say. And take into account that American comedians are actually agitators and propagandists. Like, they are operatives for the establishment. If you don't believe me, notice how literally every one of them is not funny, and they're repeating the same establishment talking points. Like, none of them are, against the establishment. You know where they stand on gun control, you know where they stand on abortions, you know where they stand on LGBT issues. Like, all of these comedians, which allegedly are different people with different minds and different ideas, just happen to think the exact same things when it comes to policy. Usually they're in line with the Democrats. But anyway, right, let's listen to what Jon Stewart has to say about Tucker Carlson's video with the Metro.
Right. Because the difference between our urinal-caked, chaotic subways and your candelabraed, beautiful subways is the literal price of freedom. But the goal that Carlson and his ilk are pushing is that there's really no difference between our systems. In fact, theirs might be a little bit better. The question is, why? Why is Tucker doing this? Here's why. It's because the old civilizational battle was communism versus capitalism. That's what drove the world since World War II. Russia was the enemy then. But now they think the battle is woke versus unwoke. And in that fight, Putin is an ally to the right. He's their friend. Unfortunately, he is also a brutal and ruthless dictator. So now they have to make Americans a little more comfortable with that.
That is so bizarre. Like, that is so bewildering, given the fact that America is allied with Saudi Arabia, and we can go on a couple of the human rights violations that go in Saudi Arabia when it comes to women, when it comes to LGBT rights, like all of that, you know, they're not going to explain why they never criticize Saudi Arabia. But they are going to say that if Tucker goes in Russia and talks about the metro, and he is asking the question, which is a legitimate question, by the way, why is it that their metro looks good and our metro looks shit? The answer is the price of freedom. I don't think the founding fathers ever talked about the freedom to do crime, though, right? Like even the founding fathers, which created a nation that did actually talk about freedom, all of a sudden they were like, no, you have the freedom to commit crimes. No, they actually had criminal law, and they would hang horse thieves and stuff like that, right? So the answer on why the Russian metro is better than the American metro, if Jon Stewart wasn't an agitator and actually did use his own mind, would be, first of all, it's not. I mean, there are a couple of stations that are very beautiful, and there are a couple of stations where there is no crime. But outside of those stations, which are mostly where the rich people live and where you have tourism, just like any other metro, except for, I guess, like Japan, but like just like any other metro, there is crime, there is graffiti, there is, right? Like that would be a more reasonable answer to the question that Tucker asked. And the other thing is, like, the reason that those stations are actually beautiful is because they have a no-nonsense policy. They don't go like, oh, well, this person committed the crime. Let's look at what woke ideology tells us if we're allowed to persecute or not. Right? Like that's not how it works in Russia. In Russia, if you go and you use graffiti on the metro, you get arrested, period. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. And if you resist, they beat you up. Like there's no question about it. There's no, wiggle room. And when people see you getting beaten up on social media, they will say, good, why the fuck were you resisting? Like that is why in Russia, the metro is the way it is in the places that Tucker went to. And the idea of freedom, I find it fascinating to actually hear from a mainstream media talking head the concept of freedom. Like, when is the last time you heard them talk about freedom regarding to America? The last time I can't even remember. They usually talk about our democracy. They talk about equity. They used to talk about equality. Never freedom, though. I've never heard them talk about freedom in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal. Like I know they used to, by the way. They used to talk about freedom back in the day. And the founding fathers actually did create America with the concept of freedom in mind. But recently, it's all about protecting our democracy. Like, that is the end goal, right? The democracy is the holy everything, which the founding fathers, by the way, didn't appreciate, because they said democracy leads to the situation where you have in Europe. You have oligarchies, you have a couple of elites that constantly vote themselves into power, and they don't care about the people. So the founding fathers of the United States indeed cared about freedom, right? So they were like, we're going to have this constitutional republic, and we're going to limit the powers of the government, and we're going to make sure that the people are armed so the government doesn't fuck with the people. And that was the envisionment of the founding fathers then. The only reason they're bringing up freedom now is because, we're talking about Russia, and Russia bad because Putin dictator bad. It's like, okay, well, why don't you say the same shit about China then? I mean, Joe Biden says nice things about China, right? Like if you don't like dictators, why don't you talk bad stuff about the countries in the Middle East? Why don't you talk about that? Very interesting, isn't it? Anyway, right, let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.